Welcome and thank you for joining us today for highlights from the EMA Radar Report for Workload Automation and Orchestration 2023. And my name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Dan Twing, President and COO from Enterprise Management Associates, Robbie Dick, Principal Solutions Marketing Manager at BMC, and Gabe Geller, Lead Solution Marketing Manager at BMC. Dan joined EMA in 2005 and has over 25 years of experience in information systems, software development, and technology outsourcing. Dan focuses on all aspects of intelligent and automated management of IT. Robbie joined BMC Software in the summer of 1999 has been involved with automation since 1995 in a variety of roles, including end user, administrator, pre-sales, consulting, and marketing. And finally, Gabe has over 15 years of experience in marketing and communications for a variety of industries. At BMC, he manages the development of messaging and marketing content, event execution, and customer reference and ARPR activities. And before I hand things over to today's featured speakers, I wanted the audience to know that our speakers will be wrapping up today's event by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with the on-demand playback, as well as a link to access the report. So I hope you will check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Dan Twing. Dan?
Thanks, Raleigh. Well, today, what Robbie and Gabe and I talked about is covering the results of the most recent radar report on the workload automation market, looking through the lens of 4 really key important topics. So we're going to start with a quick flyover of the radar results, and then we're going to dive deeper on the topics of automation and workload orchestration, mainframe modernization, DevOps, and data pipelines. So those are some of the bigger trends driving things, but we'll start with just the overall analysis. So this is, if you've been to any of these radar conversations before, you're familiar with the process maybe. When we published the most recent one in August of 2023, this past year, that was the 7th report that we've done on this topic since 2010. When we do these, we develop a list of critical features and capabilities, and that list has been maintained now since 2009, 2010. All of the vendors comment and help us flesh out that list every year. So it reflects the changes as they've happened, and we'll talk about some of those with these topics today. We establish some key summary points on all of those measures, and then look at which products should fit the characteristics. When we measure it, what's being measured has to be generally available. We try not to be talking about shelfware, but stuff that's actually submitted. Sometimes we will talk about some futures in the roadmaps as certain things are, take sometimes multiple releases to fully take shape. And then, we go through the analysis that includes customer interviews. I'll usually talk to 2 or 3 clients from each of the 19 vendors that we reviewed. And then we analyze and score the results. And of course, what everybody waits for when that's done, even though there's a ton of work and a lot of information behind it, everybody wants to see this page right here. It's one that has morphed quite a bit over the years as the market has changed. A lot of times, here, a lot of the products are in that value leader category, that dark upper quadrant or section of the report there. That in a market like this, it's a very mature market. I think, certainly we could change where those breakpoints are, but I think this makes sense. And yes, there are that many products that are very, very significant in this space and very mature. And of course, with the folks from BMC here, they've been through this process, I think, every time. So, and always do very well in the analysis because it's a very robust product. And we'll talk a little bit about the specific results for BMC. So part of the analysis includes this radar or pentagon shaped chart. It's just a thing Excel can do to give you multiple axes. And here we have 5 key data points: functionality, the deployment and admin, the cost advantage, vendor strength, and architecture and integration. And when I set out to design this analysis, I really looked at how, when I was the one buying a product, what are the things that I was concerned about, and we kind of cut the analysis up this way, and it's worked pretty well. The functionality and the architecture actually add together to make that horizontal, that vertical axis on that earlier chart. And then the cost and the deployment decide the right to left placement. And it's really, the way I think about it is, what you get is on the vertical, and what you have to give up to get it is on the horizontal in terms of administrative time. I think a lot of times with products, people, focus a lot on the features, but you have to live with these things for a long, long time. So it's good to understand, how they might work. And when I do the customer interviews, I'll usually ask a few questions, and I try to pull out some of the better comments for the report. Some of those are listed here, and you can certainly see those. They're in the report. But there's always a lot of positive comments, and people who live with these tools, they all have their little special thing, right? That's most important to them. Like the first comment there, I've become the evangelist because of the flexibility. So here's somebody who's, whatever their job is, that's key to them, and Control M delivers it. And you can see a number of those other comments there. When we did the analysis each time, we look at the new trends, and some of the things that have really been driving this market is this sort of shift. It's not really a shift in what we're doing, and I'm anxious to have this conversation with Gabe and Robbie, but it's always kind of done both of these things. It's just the focus has shifted maybe more towards orchestration. So before we even talk workload, let's just talk about the definition of these two terms. Automation is really the use of technology to replace a manual task or tasks with automated processes. You're focusing on streamlining a routine. These are usually, automation is usually talking about an individual task, maybe a repetitive task. Where the orchestration concept comes in is coordinating multiple complex tasks end to end across multiple areas or stakeholders. So it's just that automation on a much broader scale with priorities, complexities that have to be addressed along the way. So it's a little more of the order of things rather than the thing itself that needs to get done. And really, these tools have always done that. I mean, we've used them to achieve a specific business objective, connecting multiple jobs together. You might think a job stream in some ways represents some aspects of orchestration, and it does. But as automation really becomes more complex, there becomes more need to orchestrate around it. And so if we take that to the next idea here, which is, how do you apply that specifically in workload? Workload automation is really emphasizing the scheduling, the execution, the monitoring of these tasks. The more traditional batch job scheduling, a data backup, move this file here or there. It's a very, single task oriented kind of thing. But as we move to the cloud, we have much more complex business processes that are being automated. There's a lot more need to kind of connect the dots. And that's really where workflow orchestration comes in, because now we're managing complex end-to-end workflows. They may span multiple systems. They may have intricate dependencies one to the other. And if you're saying, well, workload has always had that, yes, it has. It's gotten more. Might be a good place to pause. And I don't know, Robbie or Gabe, if one of you wants to talk about how you guys have sort of shifted to talking more about workflow orchestration. It's not something new. It's just something that's become more and more important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Yeah, first of all, love working with you, and deep diving on the radar. But yeah, I've been at BMC for going on 25 years, always control M, but really in two different roles. I was more of a keyboard toucher, kind of an administrator and user of the product for the first half, and now a little bit more marketing. So it's a little bit less keyboard touching. But I remember vaguely, but sometimes I do remember the way we talked about it and the way customers talked about it and used it back in the 2000s. Database backups, strict replacements for cron at that time. Some of those things still happen, largely in the same way that they did. But and at that point we talked about it as a date and time or event-based scheduling, and then that kind of morphed into workload automation. But really in the last 10 years, for I think a few very specific reasons, but the proliferation of application data and infrastructures that environments need, that businesses need to deliver business services, and really the corresponding massive influx of new people, at least new to this discipline, has really changed it. And so that's about the time we started really as a company talking about this more as application workflow orchestration. And like you said, Dan, sometimes those words have fairly similar meaning, but I think you nailed it. Just the complexity of the environment, sometimes doing that kind of old school stuff that still needs to be done, but doing all the new things with the new applications and the new data repositories and the new people really takes it amplifies it to another level. And that's how we talk about automation versus orchestration, or how we talk about it now. So
and then, I know we talked earlier, Robbie, I know you like this look. I don't even remember who suggested these questions in the research I did in the summer last year, but really was one of the first times that we started asking about the impact of workload automation, like on business parts of the company, right? Like, just tell me, which departments are you running workloads for? Well, that part seems pretty straightforward. Finance, we all know that the month-end close and a lot of things around ERP systems is a lot of the scheduling work. Supply chain, service, and sales, all of these areas really have lots of work that depends on these tools in the background. And then the interesting one, though, I thought, was when the middle box there, business functions that use the self-service. And I asked folks, just let me know who's using it daily or multiple times a week. And I mean, I was really surprised to see sales so high on that list. But, there's certain reports or file transfers or outcomes as we become more data-driven focused, and the data doesn't get where it needs to go without the workload tools, then it's not surprising that so many parts of the companies are actually relying on the software and engaging and interacting with these self-service information dashboards.
I wasn't kidding, Dan, when we talked about this earlier. I mean, I think I've been involved in all 7 of those reports, because that's about when I moved into the role I'm at now. So, I don't remember the details of when it all, because like you said, a lot of it comes through, even though there's always new stuff and, new things you want to talk about, new things that we're bringing. But so I don't remember if we kind of helped suss this out, but I mean, this literally almost brought a tear to my eye when I saw it, because, this is the business, and that's the way we've been talking about it really almost exclusively for 10 years. And I'm not saying, because our customers are talking about it, or absolutely starting to realize that, where I don't think they did 15 or 20 years ago. Workload automation was done by IT operations kind of in the back room, and they didn't know much about the business, to be quite honest, and the business didn't know much about them. But it's gotten out into the light of the day. I mean, these business disciplines or areas listed here, these are the business. And so it makes me smile, because I kind of live and breathe this, at least in my working life. And to see it, listed this way with such high percentages across all, especially the one in the middle, it's fantastic, because it's critical to the business. It is the business.
Yeah. And, I think the more we rely on digital processes, the more this, it's interesting to try to explain workload automation to people who've never had to stand in the line of fire on a production night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just, so there's been a lot of
Yeah.
investment interest in this lately, and I've talked to a number of private equity firms trying to help them understand this market. And it's difficult sometimes to get people to understand what this tool does and how behind the scenes it has been for so long and yet so critical. And it's only just in the last few years where others in the company are even aware it exists and know that it can help them or give them a little bit of information. I mean, it's coming to the fore more often. And I think as we talk about orchestration, people will feel the benefits of it maybe more than they have. But it's always been back there doing this. And it's just hard to explain to somebody, they're like, so where is it going next? Is it new business processes? And can you automate those things? It's like, yes and no, right? I mean, it's going to be there helping, but it doesn't do all of it, right? There's still going to be new apps and things built. That's what all of these people are doing, interacting with it, right? And if you don't do it every day, you miss the fact that it really is touching all of the key parts of the business. As we move into one of the next topics, the data pipeline and orchestration, I start putting this chart out here. It's not one I show publicly often, but I do it for myself inside the radar with each of those 55, 60 KPIs that we track. So there's one specific one, data pipeline integration. There's 5 or 6 questions that the vendors answer about features and capabilities that lead to the scores. And then if you've read the radar report before, there's like a 5-point rating that we give on each of these sort of features or capabilities. And so those questions around integrating and managing data pipelines, you can see that 6 of the 19 vendors in the report were rated as outstanding, another 3 as strong, 5 as solid, and so on. So kind of these give me a sense of the maturity in the market of the category, right? And you can see roughly, about half the market is very solid on data pipelines, and there's a small part that doesn't do as much with them, right? Some of the products that we cover are meant for very specific purposes, and they don't do all of the things, but a good portion of the market does. And when you look at moving data and managing data pipelines, that's a key part of when we talk about orchestration, because you're talking about a lot of moving parts on both ends and statuses and things that can go wrong. And, sometimes the big data need is represented by 1,000 little jobs, right, in the background. So, when I was talking to one of the private equity firms recently, they were trying to draw a very simple picture of what these tools do. And when you're trying to explain it to the uninitiated, it's really difficult at times. And I said, we laid out a very simple payroll example. You got to collect the data from all the time machines or whatever your metric is for people's payroll. And then you've got to go through these steps. And, there may be different programs along the way. Just trying to explain to them what Workload does. And the end, it's like, that's a real simple picture, but part of the challenge is not the complexity. It's just the scale. That's a relatively simple 10 steps, but 2,000 things have to go through those 10 steps in 2 hours. And it's really bad when it goes wrong. So, sometimes I think people see this as more complicated than it is. Some of the things we do aren't that complicated. there's just so much of it, right? It's the volume, I think, that people don't get. And I think a lot of what's on this page speaks to what that means to interacting around these data pipelines. We look inside the radar a little bit deeper. Some of those questions behind the category, right? So with respect to data pipeline, one of the things we ask is what big data or NoSQL products are integrated. And you can see here that 80% of the vendors in the report are supporting Hadoop. only 40% are supporting Couchbase, and so on. So you can read it like that. A lot of times these things get supported based on customer needs, right? I mean, you know, these guys might have in their product roadmap that they're going to connect to 4 new databases. It's going to happen based on which clients want it when, right? That's how the priorities get set. So it's not really important that everybody support everything, but just to give you a sense of what's out there, if you look at the chart below, the number of vendors that are integrating big data or NoSQL products. So about 6-7% of the market doesn't support it at all. There's 0 vendors doing that. About 20% of the vendors support one of those products. That's how you can read that chart, and so on. So, you know, there are about 20% of the vendors that are supporting 8, 9, or 10, all 10 of those. So some of them are broadly supporting, some support the 1 or 2 that they need, and they'll support others when a client asks. But just to give you a sense of how these products are doing it, you know, we also looked at what is integrated, what BI and analytics tools are integrated, and SAP BW being the most commonly requested integration. But, you know, Google BigQuery, Azure Databricks, I mean, these are the things near the top of the list. And again, you know, it's relatively easy to add these, and most of the vendors have been doing a very aggressive job of adding those. And in fact, Gabe, I think you were going to talk a bit about what you guys have been doing to keep up with all the integration requirements.
Yeah, definitely, Dan. So, you know, data is absolutely critical for companies today. And as you mentioned, it can be really challenging. There are very complex data pipelines, and it's sometimes very difficult to get them into production at scale. So as you're kind of alluding there, our focus has really been around orchestrating data pipelines across every phase, from ingestion to storage to processing, and ultimately to insights, and helping companies get that into production so that their data pipelines are adding value. We've done a number of things. It's a key area of focus for us. We've introduced the Python client, which is a way of exposing Control M to data personas who are familiar and comfortable with Python. And then we've rolled out a number of new cloud and data integrations. Airflow is one. And if you want to toggle over to the next slide, you can see the full eye chart. We've really doubled down on making sure that there are so many technologies in the data space that companies rely on, and we want to try to make as many of them connected with or integrated with Control M and easy to use. So we've doubled down. We're introducing new integrations every month, and you'll see a lot of the cloud data services here. You'll see a lot of the BI and file transfer tools, data processing and analytics. So we've really doubled down and put a lot of emphasis here. And I'll also mention a customer story. You know, we recently worked with Domino's Pizza. They're the largest pizza company in the world. They have over 20,000 locations. And there was a quote in one of the tools that we worked with them on where they say that they are a data company who delivers pizza. Data is really critical to them. So with Control M, we're helping them orchestrate over 3,000 data pipelines. And these are important, right? They deliver critical reports for executives and franchisees. The things that really drive the business, and using Control M as an orchestrator for these data pipelines has really helped them absorb just tons of data. Their data volumes are growing daily, so they've been able to absorb that, and at the same time they've been able to improve SLA performance and produce the reports that matter faster. So you know, we're seeing a lot of stories like this Domino's one with companies who are really emphasizing the importance of their data, and they're tackling that orchestration problem and really finding some success.
Great. We're going to move next to the mainframe and WLA. And the main topic we're going to talk about is mainframe modernization. But I thought we should first at least level set some quick data points on mainframe support within all of the category of workload automation. So similar chart here. Looking at the sum of 5 or 6 questions that assess mainframe support, and there are 3 vendors that end up with an outstanding rating here, another 7 with a strong rating. So, you know, a good roughly half the market is pretty solid on mainframe support, and another half of the market isn't so much, because there are some products that focus predominantly on distributed systems. Control M is one of those that does everything and then some, and continually redefines the category along the way sometimes. So clearly when it comes to mainframe support, yeah, BMC is one of those, up on the outstanding end of this scale. Just drilling in a little bit of what's behind that, and I'm going to get through these pretty quickly. But first of all, what is it? There are different ways that you can automate a job on the mainframe. So you'll see there that about 53% of the vendors, they can do from a cloud-based central control, they can, engage agents that live on a single LPAR versus, whether you have like native mainframe implementation, less than half of the vendors can do that. Or if you have a distributed cloud-based CPE that's running agents across the Sysplex, only about half can do that. So, there's varying levels of mainframe support. And if you look to the right, I did the same thing here, sort of just doing a count. There's only 4 vendors who do all 4 of those things. I'm sorry, it's 26% of the market that's doing about all 4 of those things. And then you got a couple vendors that do 3, a couple that do 2 of them. So not everybody's mainframe support is the same, right? I mean, you would expect that. Similarly, you've got security products on the mainframe, and you can see that, 20% of the vendors support every one of those, and a handful support the ones that they've had customers that have requested them to do so. When we move from mainframe support to modernization of mainframes, this is a topic that's starting to crop up quite a bit, because obviously all of the work that's coordinated through the workload tools that lives on the mainframe is going to change depending on how that mainframe is modernized. And there's a number of different ways. I'm going to touch on this very lightly, but you can move it to the cloud. You can re-platform or re-host the application. So there are services in the cloud that will let you run, old COBOL from the mainframe, run the JCL, and it figures it out for you in the cloud, to actually refactoring or re-engineering, modernizing those applications in place, modernizing the data structures, but just rebuilding it to live on the mainframe. So really, you can go in both directions. And this is a topic that's finally being dealt with. In my opinion, a lot of the early digital transformations were bolting on apps and things, but leaving the legacy systems in place. And now we're really starting to dig in on moving the legacy systems. So there are tools that help you with the mainframe migration, and the workload vendors have absolutely included some of these tools integrated into their products. So Micro Focus is the most common one, and you've got about a third of the vendors in the market that support Micro Focus's mainframe migration capabilities. Another 20% of the vendors that support AWS's mainframe modernization path. Google Dual Run also supported, and then there's a variety of other things that people commented on, in the other category there. There's, most of the vendors are attacking this, across a couple of these, if they're taking it on at all. So you can see right away, about 2/3 of the market are not doing this. There are 0 vendors, or that have 0 of these capabilities, is about 2/3 of the market. So only about 1/3 of the market is addressing this, and 3 of the vendors, or 20% of that market, has all 3 capabilities. And then there's a part of the market that's got 1 of those capabilities. They may be different ones. One might be supporting Google, one might be supporting AWS, but collectively that group of vendors has, a single option if you're trying to address mainframe migration. And then there's a handful of vendors who support all of those capabilities. So I'll let you guys talk to how you're addressing this concept. I think, Robbie, you were going to address this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to quote what you said earlier. I think you said BMC does everything. I think that's a direct quote. I love it. I mean, this is one of the areas that we do. For many of you, many on the call here may know. I mean, Control-M started as a mainframe product in the 80s. fast forward to 99 when I started, I was a Unix administrator at that point. I wasn't a mainframe guy. I've been in probably hundreds of data centers now where with mainframes, and I've been in probably thousands of meetings where there's been mainframe and distributed folks in the room. But this is one of those areas that we've always had extreme deep support for the mainframe, and that continues, whether that means running or orchestrating workloads largely unchanged, or whether that means some or all of those workflows are moving to the cloud. It's not every customer and every meeting that's doing that, but it is absolutely happening. And our support here, our philosophy is, that's the customer's decision. We're here to support you however you need to do it. So we're one of those very few that support all the ones Dan just mentioned with AWS M2 or Google Dual Run or Micro Focus in a modernization effort for mainframe. So that could mean a little bit of what used to run on the mainframe is now running in the cloud, where a lot or a significant amount of the mainframe workload still remains unchanged or stays on the mainframe. And we have customers that are doing that, and we support that. We have a few that have absolutely moved everything over or are efforting to move everything over. Control-M can help them. It is helping them to do that. Ultimately, it's their decision if they flip the switch on the mainframe, which does happen. But with Control-M and our deep, long-time support for mainframe, as well as those modernization efforts that AWS and Google, as well as others, are bringing, we support them. So, and we have a lot of stories. One in particular, AG Insurance. It's a large European insurance company. They have a great story of how Control-M helped them basically migrate 80 million lines of code, and they cut it over on one weekend. And that it's there's quite a bit more to the story, but it's just pretty fascinating. And that's happening. I mean, that's a real thing. It's happening every day. So AG Insurance is one, but really we have multiple stories about customers. Some of them are turning it off. Some of them are keeping it in place. But everybody's doing some at some point on the mainframe modernization spectrum, let's say.
Right, and it's interesting that an organization may take one strategy for one period of time, may change up, may want everything to go down one of these three columns, but yet there might be a couple of apps where they decide that they need to live on a different column for that one process, right? I mean, it's not.
You're right. There's a lot of forks in the road. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have a plan, and then of course life, the real world gets in the way, and then the plan changes, and that's also seems to be constant. You are correct. So we try to stay very flexible in supporting them and letting them do what they need to do, what the business needs to do.
Right, and as as we move into the next topic, I mean, it's another one where it's sort of, you have to make a lot of options available because people are going to take them up at their own pace, right? So, a lot of organizations are at different places on the DevOps life cycle, if you will, in terms of how they're moving through that. This is another one of those, summary points within the radar, and we've got, the data points here. You can see that, with DevOps practices, it's a mix of the orchestration really starts to come into things, I think, quite a bit more as you're moving things through that DevOps lifecycle. You've got the automation of workflows, you've got integration of the CI/CD pipelines. You're really starting to coordinate some very complex processes. You're very likely in a cross-platform environment. And monitoring, reporting is really important. And of course, infrastructure as code comes into play as well, because how the DevOps process flows and the information that's there to folks is important. So you can see that 15 of the 19 vendors in this category are in the outstanding or strong rating. So most of the products in this market have really absorbed and addressed this, but everybody doesn't do it to the same degree. So one of the first things that we'll talk about, and I think you guys were very early at using this language, but it's kind of used more broadly today, which is support for jobs as code. And you can see sort of broke that down into all of the 10 steps maybe that you would go through, 10 or 12 steps to fully support jobs as code. And you can see across the vendors in the radar report, support is mixed. There's about half the market, 53%, that is supporting 11 or 12 of those 12 capabilities. So about half the market does pretty well with it. Then there's that group in that 7, 8, 9 category. You got another 25-30% of the market. And then there's the 15% on the other end that's not really addressing this. So, and that obviously, if I had shown you this chart over 7 years, of course, this was a non-existent topic 7 years ago, and then these spikes would have started spiking up, right? You guys, BMC was absolutely one of the early push on this concept. Another concept here is the API functions that are exposed. And in fact, you'll see we have a category now more than 100% of what's in the GUI, because there are, in many cases, things you can do through the API that don't exist in the GUI, plus all of the GUI functions are represented. And we're now at a point where 60% of the market has all of those capabilities sort of, in there. Another 20%, all of their GUI is capable, through API. And another chunk of the market is very close to that 100%. So, this is something that's moved pretty quickly. It's matured pretty quickly. Another question, is your import export DevOps ready? 86% of the market is there. It's pretty mature capability. Take a real quick look at a little deeper CI/CD tools. You can see the support there across the market, and kind of the maturity there. Good, what is that on the high end there? 30-40% of the market really is up in the 8-9 tools that they support. This is one of those weird things that if a client only uses one of these tools, they only need a vendor to support one of them, right? So, having one can be enough, but, I'm sure, Robbie, you and Gabe get this all the time, right? I mean, there's always the customer who needs the one you don't have that you have to add to close the big deal, right? And so these lists grow as customers have needs, but the vendors that are most active are the ones living up in that 8 or 9 such tools integrated. Same with the source code control tools. You see a similar pattern there, not quite as much maturity in that part of the market yet. And on the last one here, we look at infrastructure config tools. This is some of the inside baseball inside of when we do the radar reports. There's a lot of metrics. Here we're drilling into a few of them. Here, looking at these infrastructure config tools, and Ansible and Terraform together represent, a big chunk of the vendors in this space. But here again, you'll see that, there's a good chunk of the market that's not doing any of it. 26% don't support these tools at all. A couple of products have 1 or 2, and then there's a handful of products that are supporting, the breadth of these that are available. And again, a vendor doesn't need every one of them, but they tend to add them when the big account on the margin that they're trying to close wants one they don't have. The bigger vendors tend to have more of these because they just have more requests across more accounts. But with that, I think we're ready to move into the Q&A part. Unless you guys have any other, maybe I should have paused here. I'm sorry. Do you guys have any comments on this category at all? Do you guys want to chime in here before we move to the Q&A?
Yeah, Dan, I would just say you're spot on that, BMC recognized pretty early on the need for collaboration between dev and ops. That's why we introduced Workload Automation API to really give that code-based interface for developers to interact with our workflow orchestration platform. And yeah, we leaned into jobs as code and really try to put that out there in the market, early and often, so that companies had a way for dev and ops to come together to deliver better applications faster. And kind of harkening back to one of the earlier slides that you and Robbie were talking about, where you see the proliferation of workflow orchestration across the organization. You know, years back, it was all an IT ops thing. And as you see all those different groups coming in, we have companies now, our customers that are have like, you know, hundreds of developers that are actually interacting with Control-M on a very frequent basis. So it's an area that we're still, you know, we're focused on. We do monthly updates to Automation API, and you know, so we're seeing a lot of companies having success there, and we're glad to be able to support that.
Well, and I also think that the DevOps is kind of the launching pad for all of the other goodness that can come from the orchestration, right?
Sure.
Like there's so many more things that developers could leverage these workload tools to do that they often just build their own little custom routine because they're not historically as aware of these tools as the operators were, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, the DevOps functions are important, but they're the tip of the iceberg of how far these tools can go yet to coordinate all the work that goes on. But it's the most important one to me because this is where the developers start to get exposed to the possibilities, and the really smart ones will start to go, what don't I have to code next, right? And you know, I've already
Absolutely.
I really want to do these 3 pet projects, but there's these annoying mundane tasks. Well, guess what? There are tools that will take those burdens off of your shoulders, right? And
100%.
do those mundane tasks for you very, very well and report on them and all of the things that the workload tools do. I think this is the gateway to all the other goodness that can come, right? That you know, we've seen it some in the pipeline management because that got really focused, and that's one that maybe broke out early in terms of orchestration. But there's a lot more yet that can be done with these tools to orchestrate processes. And I think this is the gateway they're going to pass through to get there. Once the development organization figures out what they can leverage, it will open the floodgates even broader. And I think that's really where we're at, is just getting the education as to what, you know, what you don't have to code because you can rely on a tool to help you. And I mean, I used to be a developer. You got plenty of code to write. You don't need to be writing stuff that exists elsewhere, right? You just don't.
Yeah, spot on. Robbie and I get the benefit of sitting in meetings, and sometimes we get to see the light bulb go off on the capabilities and possibilities when developers get their hands on a tool like Control-M. And we hear, you know, a lot of really great stats. I remember Carfax is one we worked on a few years back, where they talked about releasing apps into production used to take weeks and months, and now it can be done in minutes because you've got the dev and ops collaboration on the front end, and it just ultimately results in better business applications and faster deployment.
Absolutely. And it's the model for a lot of other areas that will be coming. And again, it's almost like this was burning, and then the data pipelines burned a little brighter and actually ran out ahead of this a little bit, didn't they?
Yeah,
because because you had a problem to solve and everyone wanted to solve it, and these tools stepped up. You guys and others in this space added capabilities, and there's still a lot more to be done there. And I think that the between the pipelines and the DevOps is what's going to get people to understand the possibilities of where these tools can go. And you know, I think the orchestration term comes into play because the complexity of what you think about with these tools now is just a broader brushstroke, right? Like when I started programming back in the late 80s, it was a pretty linear, straight, top to bottom sort of job steps, right? And there's still plenty of jobs that are like that, but the capabilities of these tools are so much broader now, and we're still only scratching the surface of what can be supported by these tools. And I think this is the gateway to get there, is get the developers to understand the capabilities first. Because I'll tell you, when I was a developer, you're constantly looking for things that save you time and code you don't have to write. And there is a lot of code you don't have to write wrapped up in these tools. So
Sure.
yeah.
We
With
did a
that,
great Great analogy, just real quick, that we heard in one of our customer meetings, like for a car manufacturer that's building a new car, and particularly with the electric vehicles, there's been a lot of new cars that have been introduced in the last 5 or 10 years, but those car manufacturers aren't making the tire. Tires are made by some, and it's okay to use a tire from a manufacturer that makes tires.
Yes.
And so I think that's a great analogy. Like, developers can write code to do anything, and they can use their CI/CD and app dev tools to do that. But this is what we're here to tell them. With Jobs as Code, Automation API, there's a product or products that can help you. You worry about the business code and what the business needs. We'll worry about the orchestration and the instrumentation for the the workflow for the orchestration parts. So I thought that was a great analogy from one of our customers.
Very good. Yeah, I think, it's interesting when you take a look at how the arc of 45 years has changed this category of tools. You could see a storyline where they could easily have become irrelevant along the way, but they have stepped up every time. And even in this era, they're becoming actually more important because you've got stuff across so many environments. There are tools that will help you within a single environment, but nothing thinks across all of those environments the way this class of software does. And there's a lot of learning yet for the folks who haven't lived with these tools in operation as to what they really can help do. And I think the developer world has been waking up to that. But I don't think it's fully awake yet, even. I think we haven't quite yet seen all the power they're going to learn to wring out of these tools.
Great.
Yep.
So with that, let's move to the Q&A section and see what folks want to talk about.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Before we jump into the questions, though, I did want to let the audience know that BMC is offering the full report. So I hope you visit this URL and download it. The first question I'm going to throw out to you, probably all have insights, so I'm going to ask and then you can all provide your insights. The first question is, what's the best way to make developers aware of these workload automation capabilities? Do you go on a roadshow, send them links, videos, etc.? What advice would you all give?
Well, certainly we've done a lot of webinar type content to help with that education, but I'm really interested to see what Robbie and Gabe have to say about how they're, engaging customers and helping organizations kind of spread that word. I would think you almost have to take kind of an evangelist approach here to help people understand that they already have licensed a very powerful tool. And I think a lot of times developers don't, I spent a lot of years as a developer. You need to be efficient in what you do. And if somebody's already built something that works, you don't want to recreate it, but it's hard to know all of the things that are available. And I think, the development community, the more they understand what's in these tools, I would think the more they will gravitate towards it. But it is a bit of an education. I don't know, you guys are out there educating folks all the time.
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, we're on a team. We've got about 15 colleagues on our team, and there's like 5 or 6 of us that constantly at events. A lot of times it's existing customers. Oftentimes it's predominantly IT operations folks, but they're bringing their data friends, they're bringing their developer friends. That's how we message, for the events that we're delivering. And of course, if anybody goes to bmc.com or just search for Control M and come across the web pages, it's that messaging, those capabilities are featured prominently. But you almost have to have an in already, with the group that's already using Control M in maybe a more traditional way or with the traditional audience. So it's no secret. It's a challenge to get to that entirely new audience on their own, but we do it at every event that we have and in every webinar that we do. We're trying and read the radar. Read the radar.
Yeah, I would just add to that too. Once some of our customers start finding success, which it doesn't take long once they go down this journey, a lot of times they become the champions within their organizations and externally. So we've had, a number of situations where customers are doing their own internal marketing, even the IT ops folks saying, look what has been done, look what can be done, and bringing more people to the table. And then also sometimes they're willing to come and speak at our events and share their success stories. And I think it's a really powerful tool as well.
Great insights. Thank you. Robbie, jumping back over to you, in the meetings you participate in, what does the breakdown of people look like? Meaning, are they really from the business side or are they still largely from the IT side?
Oh, okay. I love I'm making up numbers, even being in IT and all the talk of data. I don't have specific like hard and fast numbers, but I love making estimates. I would say, oh geez, I've been here 25 years of, the first X number of years, let's say 5 years, it was 100% from IT. Fast forward 10 years after that, so that's up till about 10 years ago, that started to change a little bit. I would say, 10 to 20% were folks outside of IT. And in the last, let's say 2018, 2019, so the last, 6 or so years, it continues to move. I'll say 30% of attendees are not in IT, they're business users or some other role outside of IT. So it's definitely changed over the years. But ideally, what we're talking about is what matters in production at scale. And so that, I think will always or likely always involve IT operations or that shared central services group, as well as those new users that Gabe talked about, or that we have, like every customer story that we have talks about business users, developers, data professionals that are now involved. So, and I think 5 or 10 years from now, it'll be more like 50-50. At least that's my hope. That's where I think it's going. But it's a constant evolution and in kind of an influx of new roles.
If you think about it, Robbie, if you think about, I've just been sitting here thinking about the earliest, your first 5 years, right, in the early 2000s, which by then this category of software was already 15 years old anyway, right?
Correct.
I mean, the very first time that you needed, as soon as we had 2 programs to run, it's like, well, something's got to decide what runs when, right? I mean, the categories kind of existed for a while, but
Absolutely.
it really came into its own in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, with the distributed systems and kind of rethinking things. But I think about the auto industry, right? If you think about the Model T versus the car we buy today, the thing never went away, even though technology changed radically. Well, workload is kind of like that. I mean, people keep going, well, when's this going to die and the next thing come along? Or, isn't that an older topic, and it's like, well, yeah, but that need, that timekeeping, beat of the IT organization, the stuff getting done, how the work's getting done, the need has changed radically over 45 or 50 years, but these tools have morphed with it all along the way. And if you think about the auto industry, right, it didn't just dry up and go away, it morphed too, right?
Yeah.
A lot actually between the early Model Ts and what we see coming off the line today. And workload is a lot like that. The needs have changed radically over the years, but you guys have changed with it. And I think this is just one more example of now it's time to bring the developers closer and bring the business people closer, and it's starting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Robbie and Dan. Dan, this attendee wants to know if the WLA radar compared on-premise versus SaaS.
Well, all of them are included, and SaaS is a metric. We didn't really break the two out separately. I have thought about doing that. I certainly could do like a SaaS only version of the radar chart. But SaaS is a pretty key part of it. The market, though, I think we're still running, the last research I did over the summer, doing this from memory now, but we're in the 20s, 24% maybe are running SaaS. It's growing, but the options are growing as well. And you guys have been working really hard for a while on your Helix Control M. I I think you're getting close to having 100% of the capabilities up there. I don't know that we've crossed that line yet, but you've certainly got plenty of the features because you've got plenty of people that are leveraging it. And I know that you're, kind of driving towards that direction because many more may go to SaaS. I don't know that it'll ever be 100% of the market. But we're sitting at a 22-24% now, and there's still plenty of pent-up demand, and lots of people over the next 2 years are going to consider that option, to be sure. I don't know what you guys think about SaaS. I mean, I haven't broken it out separately, but many of the players have options there.
Yeah, for our group specifically, we are working very hard on our Helix Control M platform, but the way we look at it is we have Control M that's available as self-hosted or on-premises and SaaS, and we want to be able to support customers wherever they are in that journey. And oftentimes that's on both. There are use cases where on-premises makes sense as self-hosted, and there are also use cases within the same organization where SaaS makes sense. So like you said, we're ramping up fastly. We've got a lot of customers who are using our SaaS platform, and it's continuing to grow. So yeah, we want to be there to support them wherever.
Excellent. Thank you. Gabe, why are so many companies struggling to scale their data pipelines in production? What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of stats out there that talk about the number of data projects that fail. It's kind of astronomical, and it is undoubtedly a key focal area for companies. That's where they can turn this data into valuable insights. There are probably a lot of different reasons why those projects fail. But one, and the area that we focus on a lot, is around orchestration of data pipelines or DataOps orchestration. As you saw earlier, kind of in some of those charts, there are a lot of different technologies involved at every step of the data pipeline process. And it can be very challenging to orchestrate workflows across all of that, and especially to do so at scale and in production. So what we find and what we believe the market is really moving towards is having a DataOps orchestration tool and a platform robust enough to support the entire journey. And that certainly, it doesn't tackle every problem with data projects, but it is a huge one. And we're here to support that. And the eye chart, we lovingly call it the eye chart of all the different integrations that we threw up a little earlier, kind of shows you the level of investment and time that we're spending on making sure that technologies in each of those phases of a data pipeline are available to be supported and integrated within Control M. So, Robbie, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
No, you hit it, and Dan said it earlier. I mean, it's the data pipeline in a small, test environment. That's one thing. It's in production at scale that matters, and I think that's where industry analysts, DataOps manifesto, just DataOps and data pipeline, literature talks about the need to handle that in production at scale. That's where it matters. Like Dan, you said, every 2 hours it needs to happen, and day after day after day. It could be every 2 minutes, and the amount of data is ever increasing. So being able to operationalize that in production at scale is a big area of focus, and a lot of our data pipeline support and capabilities is to support it in production at scale. So that's a big area that we talk about, and that helps according to our customers.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dan, Robbie, and Gabe, for all your insights. And I wanted to thank our audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a follow-up email with the on-demand playback, as well as a link to access the report. I do hope you'll download it. It is a wealth of information. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope we'll see you at a future EMA research webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Raleigh.